The tanking guardian's role is to control the combat, to control the monsters. And you control the monsters by gaining their aggro, and that's like their aggression. So you want the monsters to always be trying to attack you as the guardian, and you don't want them to be trying to attack anybody else. And that's what we call getting the aggro. And when the hunter takes the aggro, they turn around and they hit the hunter or the champion or whatever the case may be. So that's one terminology that some people have not understood before. I've learned that as a tanking guardian, you basically just want to spam your threat generation skills. If there's a corruption that needs to be removed, you can put a sting on there every once in a while to help remove corruption. But in general, that's somebody else's job. One of the casters needs to be doing that, or the champion, because you really need to be just spamming your threat generation skills the whole combat. You'd be amazed how easy it is to lose the aggro to, a champ or a hunter with a first stage bow, for example. Even, you'll be like 3/4 of the way through the combat, you're like, I surely must have the aggro by now, and you'll start to try to do something fancy, whatever. And sure as you stop generating threat, somebody will get the aggro off of you. Sometimes we're doing, and it's not as often these days as we used to, but sometimes we're doing a lot of crowd control skills. Sometimes we call crowd control mezzing, which is short for mesmerized. That's actually from a different game other than Lotro, probably a couple different games, but it's a word that has stuck. So when we're talking about mezzing or CC, that's crowd control, and usually it's got a lore master or a Berg who's doing some skills. The Berg does a riddle, the lore master does blinding flash, and if you do any damage to monsters that are under crowd control effects, as a general rule, it will wake them up. So you want to understand which of your skills does damage, which of your skills does not do damage, what sort of range your skills have, and the range thing kind of just takes playing with to figure out how far away is 5 meters, how far away is 10 meters. You can use the mini-map in-game, so and it only works for, I guess there's those little red dots now, though, for monsters. So if you mouse over the person in your fellowship or the monster's dot on the minimap, it will tell you how far away they are. 5 meters is really close. So you want to be careful that if you're doing crowd control, the best thing to do is to pull whatever you're fighting away from the crowd-controlled monsters. Guarantee you somebody's not going to know what is an AoE skill or what's going to wake something up, and it will get woken up if you're fighting too close. So that's your best option. If you don't have that option, though, you want to be real careful about using AoEs and using things that cause damage. And also tab targeting around. I've woken things up when I've tab targeted to try to find other targets, and I've accidentally shot an arrow at them. There's an option you can turn off in your combat options. I'll have to look at that in a minute and see what it is.
Yeah, some skills enable auto attack or something.
Yeah, skills enable auto attack.
Yeah, turn that off.
Turn that one off, and then you actually have to, consciously hit the key to start an attack, and you can tab target around and you won't accidentally shoot something mez. And again, we don't do a lot of CC recently, and the last couple updates and patches, they haven't had a lot of crowd control going on, but sometimes it'll happen. And it's always good to know what your skills do. So I try to read over, like mouse over all of my skills, read over them. Not every update, but every couple updates, just to make sure they haven't changed anything on you, because they'll change something on you. So that's your general role as a guardian, is to control the monsters. You want to be aware that a lot of monsters have what we call a frontal AoE, so a frontal area of effect, that'll do damage to anyone standing in front. So as the Guardian, when you get the aggro, you want to make sure that you turn the monsters so that they are not facing the rest of the party. And if you notice somebody standing on your side of the monster, say something, like, please get behind, or these guys have frontal AoE, you don't want to stand in front of them. Medium and light armor people will oftentimes fall down like a sack of bricks if they're standing in front of a troll with a frontal AoE. So it is their job to know where they're standing, but if you notice them there, you can say something. In general, there's two types of threat generation. There's a force taunt. Force taunt has a duration, and it forces the monster to attack the Guardian, and it lasts for whatever that duration is. When the duration wears out, if somebody else is number one on the aggro list, then the monster will turn around and go back to them. While the duration of the force taunt is going, so like say you challenge, I think that's 10 seconds. While that 10-second duration is going on, you want to be doing any sort of threat generation you can do during that 10 seconds, so that when that 10 seconds ends, you are number one on the aggro list. I was not sure if that actually worked, but after much research and talking to some people and asking questions, I'm fairly certain that while a force taunt is going, you can still up your aggro to get higher on the threat list, and that way when it wears off, you're still number one. So that's a force taunt. There's threat generation over time. Those that's how you're gonna be able to hold the aggro of the monster for the entire fight, is by generating your threat over time. In a general way, you want to try to save your force taunts. So you want to be doing the threat generation over time more often than your force taunts. That way, if somebody does take the aggro from you, you've got a force taunt available to grab it back fast, and you're not fighting with them trying to get it back over time. So I have a list here, and again, I posted the Guardian guidelines in the open forums, I don't know, sometime this week, so everybody should be able to get a chance to look at them if they want. We've got single target threat generation, and I've got them broken up into a couple different categories. The first category is non-damaging single target threat generation. So if there's a mezzed monster, you could use these skills on the mezzed monster as long as you're not, auto attacking or shooting arrows. You can use these skills and it won't wake them up. Engage. Single target, doesn't do any damage. It's a force taunt. It puts you on the top of the aggro list for I think it's like 8 seconds on that one. Another one is Fray the Edge. That one builds
15 seconds. I'm looking at it. Engage is 15 seconds.
All right, so 15. Yeah, that's definitely a good one. Lasts a little bit longer than challenge. It's not an AoE. So single target, force taunt, engage. Another single target is Fray the Edge. That's got a really long range. So I like to, if something runs over to attack the healer or the hunter, those two people, they're generally standing furthest away. Fray the Edge will oftentimes be enough to get something off of a healer. It's a single target. It builds threat over time, so it also increases your chance of opening a conjunction or a fellowship move on the target. So you want to hit Fray the Edge often. Then we have some non-damaging multiple target threat generation. Again, these don't do damage, so they won't break crowd control. Challenge is probably your go-to one. It's got multiple targets. You can trait, a class trait, to get 2 additional targets. And you can also get an LI legacy, which will increase the number of challenge targets you get. It won't break CC, it doesn't do any damage, and it is a force taunt, so it's good to hold on to and use in case somebody pulls the aggro off of you and you need to get it back.
I've got mine up to 8 targets with legacies.
Yep. I think you can get it up to 10 with legacies and the class trait. So you're almost as cool as a warden then. Challenge the Darkness. You have to trait for that one. It's a legendary class trait. I'm sorry, a legendary trait. It's also an AoE. It does not do any damage, and it's a force taunt. It's nice, especially because it gives you a bunch of parry and block and some mitigations as well for the duration of the challenge. Litany of Defiance is multiple targets. It builds threat over time. That's one of the ones. I hit Litany of Defiance every single time it's up. Every single time. You have to perform a successful block in order for Litany of Defiance to pop up. So that's why Guardians are always on about their block. You have many, many, many things that you have to do a successful block before you'll be able to use them. And Litany of Defiance is one of them, and that's one of Eowyn's go-to threat generation.
Warriors Fortitude can force the block reactive as well if you traded for it.
Yes, you have to trait for that. Let me see where that was.
Or is that the improved version of the skill?
That's if you use the class trait Braveheart. It is a yellow class trait for the Fighter of Shadowline. That will make your Warrior's Fortitude skill automatically pop up your block reactives. So anything that requires a block will become available, even if you didn't do a block, if you use your Warrior's Fortitude, if you've got Braveheart traded. That's actually pretty handy. What you can do is you run in, you're going to grab all the monsters. So the first thing you do is a Warrior's Fortitude that makes you a little bit tougher, because you'll be taking a lot of hits right off the bat, and it will also pop up your Litany of Defiance. It will pop up your Shield Smash. It will also pop up your parry chain responses. Whirling Retaliation is your parry response for gathering aggro. It actually siphons aggro from the rest of the Fellowship within 10 meters. Unfortunately, it doesn't get hunters because they don't usually stand that close. But it'll get everybody else who's within 10 meters of the Guardian, take their threat and transfer part of it to the Guardian. It will, however, do damage, so you need to be careful with Whirling Retaliation when you're doing any sort of crowd control. So we were at Litany of Defiance. And after Litany of Defiance, another one that is good is Shield Taunt. It's the one where you take your weapon and bang it against your shield, and you can hear like a ting, ting, ting noise, and if you have the sound on in-game. That taunts multiple targets. It builds threat over time, and it will not break CC. It does not do any damage. So then we can move on to the single target damaging threat generation. So if you're fighting in a crowd and a couple of the monsters are crowd controlled, these are the ones that you need to be aware of, and you need to be careful not to wake things up, because they will wake things up. Vexing Blow is a single target threat generation over time, unless you trait, it's a class trait Harasser. It's a blue class trait. For the Defender of the Free Line. So it's single target unless you trait Harasser. If you trait Harasser, it will become a 3-target AoE in a frontal arc. So in a 90-degree arc in front of the Guardian, it will taunt and it will wake stuff up. And Alan's pointing out that there's a legacy that will increase your AoE targets. So if you, and that's true, I think I meant to make a note about it. If you use that legacy on your LI, it will also increase the amount of targets your Vexing Blow will affect if you trait Harasser. So it can be more than 3. And then Shield Blow, that's a nice easy one. There's a 2-piece bonus on the Erebor armor, the new Erebor armor at the skirmish camp. There's a 2-piece bonus that will make your Shield Blow do even more threat generation So that's a really nice one to get once you have the 3 raids out of the way on tier 1. Get the 2-piece bonus for that, and then you spam your shield blow, and that'll help you increase your threat. But it does break CC, it does do damage. So we already kind of touched on the fact that sometimes you have to block before things pop up to be able to use. Some of those things that don't show up until you block are shield swipe. It's a single target threat over time. It does do damage. Also, bash. It does damage. It's single target. It's threat over time, and that one pops up after you use a successful shield swipe. So it's kind of like, if anybody's familiar with the Berg crit chain, you have to hit with one thing, and then you open up another thing, and then you open up another thing. Same sort of idea. Shield smash is another one that will pop up after you have done a successful bash or a successful shield taunt. It's single target, and it's threat over time, and it does do damage. Then the parry response chain, it's the same idea as the block response chain, but it's really only got one thing that is threat generation related. It's the Whirling Retaliation. And that one is nice because it siphons threat from the Fellowship within 10 meters and transfers it to the Guardian. It is an AoE, so it will generate threat on multiple targets. It will also break CC on multiple targets, so you want to be careful with that. One thing that I just recently learned was that sweeping cut on a critical hit or a devastating critical hit will increase threat over time. That's another AoE. And it will only increase threat if you get a critical hit or a devastating critical hit, but if you get those, every little bit helps. We kind of already touched on the fact that in general you want to try to save your force taunt skills as a last resort. It's also important for the Fellowship to give the Guardian some time to actually get the aggro. If your mini opens up with Fellowship's Heart, or your hunter opens up with Heartseeker, or the champ goes shing shing, the first thing he does, that makes it very difficult for you to get the aggro as a Guardian. You want to have probably 30 seconds so that you get a chance to do some of your threat over time skills. Litany of Defiance, again, is one of my favorites. And remember, if you are having trouble getting a block response and you want to try trading the Braveheart, then you can just use Guardian's Fortitude, and that will pop up your block responses, allowing you to do Litany of Defiance and some of the other block responses right off the bat. I like to call for an assist. Some groups, sometimes people don't want to wait for that. But, if you're having a lot of trouble, you can ask the Fellowship to wait until you call for the assist, and then once you get a block response or off, usually one is sufficient, you can call for the assist. There's a couple different stances for the Guardian in tank mode. The old standby is Guardian's Defense. That one increases your block chance, so it will make the block response chain pop up more often, which is definitely nice. Sometimes, especially when you're fighting for aggro with some classes, especially with those first age weapons, God, I hate first age weapons, the Guardian's threat stance is very handy, because you just get a flat 28% threat increase right off the bat, just standing there doing nothing. It is something that has to be traded. You would have to trait the legendary trait Guard Threat Stance in order to be able to use the Guardian's Threat Stance. But it's definitely nice, and I think it's a good kind of beginner sort of stance. It gives you a little bit of an edge so that you can kind of get your feet wet, figure out what does what. When you feel really comfortable with things, you could try to move your traits around a little bit and go with the Guardian's Defense. But a lot of times in a raid, it's just better. Guardian's Threat, 28% flat threat increase is very helpful.
The only time I change to block stance or whatever it's called is when I'm doing Dragok. Otherwise, it's threat.
Right. That's Yep. That's something to also be aware of when you are in threat stance. As I said, you're just standing there. You're doing nothing. You're cleaning your nails with your sword, whatever. You are generating threat just standing there. So, as an example, if you are doing the library, the one where you have to kite the birds at the end, and you want to kill the boss first and kill the birds second, you want to make sure you are not in Guardian's threat stance because you'll pull the aggro just standing there of the birds. So that's something to be aware of, that just standing around doing nothing, you will generate threat. And if you don't want to have the aggro for some reason, you do not want to be in Guardian's threat stance. In general, I've traded blue for a really, really long time. That's the Defender of the Free class traits. As a general thing, the blue line, Defender of the Free, it enables the Guardian to generate more threat on multiple targets. So if there's lots of monsters you're trying to control, that's kind of a better plan. If you are only dealing with one monster, so a good example of that is the Battle for Erebor, where if you're tanking one of the trolls, and this would be just tier 1, not challenge or anything, you just have one troll. So you don't need to be generating threat on multiple targets. You need to be generating threat on one single target. And the fire comes and the catapults come and there's just a lot of damage going on. The Fighter of Shadow, the yellow line of class traits, enables you to mitigate more damage, and it enables you to hold aggro just fine on a single target. It will dampen your ability to hold aggro on multiple targets. So depending on the situation, you could either trait blue for the Defender of the Free line or yellow for the Fighter of Shadow. I was blue for the longest time. Only in the last probably 3 months have I really started playing with the yellow line. It's neat, but it has its place, so it kind of depends on what you're doing. For the longest time, this is how my Guardian was traded with her class traits. I had Litany of Challenge. It gives you +2 challenge targets, and it increases your threat generation from the challenge skill. That's the AoE taunt, the yellow one. The Litany of Challenge is a blue class trait. Threatening Presence, also a blue class trait. It increases your threat generation from your shield skills, so your bash, your shield swipe, your shield smash, shield blow, all of those would generate increased threat with the Threatening Presence. Shield of Fire, I believe that one's blue as well. That gives you 1 additional shield taunt targets. So that's the one where you bang your weapon against your shield. So instead of, I think it starts at 3, so instead of 3 you'd have 4. And again, with the Legacy, that increases your AoE targets. You can increase that even more. Grim Challenge is again blue. It makes the challenge skill cooldown 15 seconds faster, so your challenge cools down a little faster. That is, again, nice if you're fighting for aggro a lot. If you feel like you're fighting for aggro a lot and you're forced to use your Force Taunt often, Grim Challenge is nice to make your challenge skill more available. Harasser, blue trait, again, we kind of touched on this earlier. It will make Vexing Blow affect up to 3 targets in a 90-degree arc in front of you. It will break crowd-controlled monsters if they're standing in that 90-degree arc in front of you, so it does damage. Be aware of that one. I like Stoic. That's a yellow class trait from the Fighter of Shadow line. It gives you 644 tactical mitigation and some vitality. So if you are struggling, physical mitigation is usually pretty easy for the champion, for the guard to cap, because you get physical mitigation from your vitality and your stacking vitality. Tactical mitigation can be a little trickier, so if you're having trouble capping your tactical mitigation, cap is 70% by the way, the Stoic trait can help with that. I also used to keep 1 red in there. So I would have 5 of the blue, which would allow me to have the blue legendary capstone, which we'll get to in a second. But I would also have the Stoic, which is a yellow, and I'd have the Strong Lungs, which is a red class trait. That's from your Overpower line, the Keen Blade line. It reduces the cooldown of Deep Breath. Deep Breath is the one that will allow you to pop back up Guardian's Fortitude. And what was that other one? Your parry one, Shoot Fire. Pledge, Guardian's Pledge, that's what it is. So the Strong Lungs, it makes your Deep Breath cooldown go from 15 minutes to like 7.5 minutes. So that allows you to refresh your Guardian's Pledge and your Warrior's Fortitude more often. Which, if you feel like you're taking a lot of damage, you're just getting your butt kicked, whatever is going on, you've got a lot of monsters, your healer's not quite up to snuff, whatever like that, it can help you keep yourself alive. Some alternates to that, we already kind of touched on Braveheart. That is a yellow class trait, which makes your block and parry response chains come up when you use Warrior's Fortitude. So you can switch that one out instead of Strong Lungs. Or then we've got I have to log out. I can hear the music at the loading screen. Then we can move on to the legendary traits, the 3 legendary traits that you can have. We call those capstones. I think a lot of times people don't understand what we mean when we say capstone. So if you want the blue capstone or the yellow capstone, we're talking about the legendary trait that requires you to have 5 traits, 5 class traits in a certain line before you can slot it. So one of those, the blue capstone, is Litany Master. That requires you to have 5 class traits in the blue Defender of the Free line traded. And it increases the number of targets your Litany of Defiance will affect by 5. Another one is the Guardian's Threat. We talked about that one a little bit with the Guardian's Threat stance. And that's a legendary trait. It is not a capstone, so you do not have to have 5 of anything slotted in that. It allows you to have the Guardian Threat stance, which gives you the 28% threat while you're just standing there doing nothing. It also reduces your armor wear in combat, and it grants you some parry and block chance, so your parry and block response chains will pop up more often. The armor wear during combat is nice. Sometimes you'll find yourself with a really heavy repair bill because you're in the heavy armor and you're taking all the damage, so that reduces armor wear during combat will reduce your repair bill a little bit. Challenge the Darkness, which is the AoE Force Taunt skill we touched on earlier, which also increases your block and parry chances for its duration and gives you some tactical mitigation for its duration. That's also a legendary trait. It is not a capstone, so you can have that traded even if you've got whatever in your class traits. And then touch a little bit on virtues. We're getting close to the end of this, and we'll open it up for some general discussion. Virtues, you've probably heard us going on and on and on and on and on about virtues a lot. Virtues are important. They're a pain to grind. I agree with you 100%, especially on the Guardian, because it just goes slow, but it's important to have them. You can purchase them in the store, but I think you can only get them up to like level 5 in the store. And, it's going to cost you some turbine points and stuff too. So, right now, the cap for virtues is 16. They have a tendency to raise the cap, so it won't be 16 forever. You want them to be at cap if you can get them at cap. So you want them to be 16 right now if you can get them 16. If you can't get them 16, then try to get them, 14, and then work on them slowly as you can. Right now, and again, this one's my opinion. my opinion is that the virtues that you would want to focus on are the ones that grant tactical and physical mitigation. It used to be that you would want, the ones that gave you vitality and, some stats like that, but since they got rid of the stat caps and they have put so much stats on the armor pieces, like 150 vitality on your armor pieces, you really don't need to be squeezing stats out of your virtues. What's more important, again, in my opinion, is to have the mitigations and to have your mitigations capped at 70%. So, Innocence and Compassion both offer tactical and physical mitigation. So those are kind of, you get 2 for 1, 2 for the price of 1 sort of thing for Innocence and Compassion. For tactical mitigation after Innocence and Compassion, Fidelity, Honor, Tolerance, and then the dreaded Mercy. You can only slot 5. So, for example, Eowyn's Mercy is not 16. I think my Mercy is at 13 now, and I'm working it up slowly. But my other 5 are capped at 16. And there's Mercies, you don't necessarily have to trait that one because you can only slot 5. And it's a pain to get to 16. For physical mitigation, again, Compassion and Innocence offer physical mitigation. And then after that, Charity, Discipline, Patience, and Zeal. Zeal is a really nice one. It is difficult to get to cap, but it offers a lot of the mitigation. I believe mitigation is number 1 thing it gives. So, Zeal is definitely nice to have. And again, there are 6 of these and you can only slot 5. So if one of them is kind of giving you a problem, focus on the 5 that you can get to 16 and then try to get that 6th one to 16 as you can. And so there's some general skills. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Alan's mentioning that if you've already got your physical and tactical mitigation capped because you've got the armor or you've got some of these virtues slotted, if you've got a little bit of play because you're already capped, you don't have to be over capped. There's no reason to be over the 70% mitigation cap. That's just going to take, slot the virtue, close the bard, mouse over your tactical mitigation. Is it capped? Unslot the virtue, mouse, close the bard, mouse over the skill. Is it still capped? You'll just have to play with that. But you don't have to have all 5 of these mitigation ones slotted if your mitigation is already capped. There's no reason to be over cap. But it all just kind of depends on what you're wearing and what sort of jewelry you have and all that. Some general skills that I use a lot when tanking. We've kind of hit on Guardian's Pledge. You'll hear people say pop pledge or pledge is going, I've pledged. Pledge gives the Guardian block and parry and evade, extra block, parry, evade for 15 seconds. You'll also see block, parry, and evade referred to as B/P/E. Took me forever to figure that one out. But if people go, what's your B/P/E, they mean what's your block, parry, and evade. So Guardian's Pledge gives you more of those. And a lot of times, the first thing I do when I run into combat is to pop Pledge. That allows me to take damage for a little bit less damage for those 15 seconds so that my healer doesn't have to immediately use, Chorus of Salvation or whatever big heal at the beginning. It keeps them from getting aggro right off the bat. Warrior's Fortitude is the one that will give you some additional morale. It also ups your max morale. You can get the amount of morale and max morale granted increased with a legacy on your Legendary Guardian belt. I think it's called Warrior's Fortitude Max Morale Legacy. Deep Breath, we touched on this before. It will reset your cooldowns of the previous 2 skills, Guardian's Pledge and Warrior's Fortitude. So if those 2 are down, because you just used them, you can hit Deep Breath. and they'll pop back up so you can use them again. We also talked about the class trait. It's a red line class trait called Strong Lungs, and it will make the deep breath cool down 7.5 minutes instead of 15. Catch a breath. This one, you have to perform a successful block before it can be used. And unfortunately, you have to choose between this one and Litany of Defiance. So if you are not hurt, go with Litany of Defiance always. If you are hurt, then you can use Catch a Breath. It will heal a little bit of your morale. You can increase the amount healed, and you can decrease the cooldown with legacies on your Legendary Guardian belt. Guardian's Ward. It's one of your base attacks. You've had it forever. It grants you block and parry, and additional block and parry. It also gives you a little bit of tactical mitigation, and it reduces your armor wear. If you can possibly do it, you want to keep Guardian's Ward up all the time. It's got a duration for the increased block and parry and tactical mitigation. It's hard to see. You have to look for that little tiny icon under your target, or your picture there. But, if you see that shield go away, hit Guardian's Ward again, because you want to have that up all the time if you can. You can increase the amount of block and parry you get with a legacy, again, on your belt. The Guardian's belt is your go-to legendary item. The sword is for sure nice. It's got some neat stuff on it, but the belt has got your threat generation stuff on it. Sting is one of your basic skills. You've had it for a long time. It will remove one corruption effect, but it takes 10 seconds. So it goes on the monster. Again, you have to look under the target window of the monster for this little itty bitty tiny icon, but there's a little icon under there that stays there for 10 seconds. It looks like a little purple ghost. After 10 seconds, that icon goes away. If there's a corruption on the monster, the corruption will also go away. The protection skill, it's a toggle skill, and it allows you to give somebody else in the party or the raid. It will cross groups in a raid. Block, more parry, and more evade. In general, if, again, a good example is Battle for Erebor, there's 2 tanks, there's one for each troll. I always put my protection on the other tank. So if there's 2 tanks, I always put my protection on the other tank. If there's not 2 tanks, and you're in a fellowship, and you're the only tank, I usually put it on the person who I think is going to steal the aggro the most. So if there's, a super uber hunter or a super uber champion and they're stealing the aggro, put your protection on them. It helps them hopefully stay alive long enough for you to get the aggro off of them. It will give them more block, more parry, and more evade. There's, again, a legacy on the belt. I do not have that legacy. It would come in handy, but there are a couple other ones that I personally think are more important, so I just have the basic protection. This was one I just learned about. I didn't know this one. Ignore the Pain, the skill that we have that removes 3 wounds from the Guardian. First off, it'll remove a disarm effect. We hate to be disarmed, because, then you can't use a lot of your threat generation skills. In addition to removing the wounds, it opens up all of your Guardian's block response chains, so your Litany of Defiance will pop up. Your shield swipe and all that you need to have a block in order to use normally, it will pop up if you do ignore the pain, which I did not realize until I was doing research for this. Touch just a little bit on legendary items. Legendary items are kind of a whole ball of wax in and of themselves. And it takes a lot of playing with, and we'll talk about them if you have questions in a few minutes when we just open it up. But in general, like I said, your class item that has the most threat gen stuff on it is your belt. And what I recommend is you gotta have threat generation up legacy on your belt. And you want it to be as high as you can get it. You want it to be rank 9. So in order to get the most points out of your belt, you want to try to have the things at tier 6. You can use the Rittermark Scrolls of Empowerment to get those up to tier 6. And then once you get them to tier 6, you want them to be ranked fully all the way to rank 9. Another one for your belt is challenge targets. That will increase the number of targets affected by your challenge skill by 1 for each rank. So say without any special traits or anything, your challenge just right off the bat affects 3 targets. You get this legacy on your belt and you put it up 1 rank, then it affects 4 targets. You put it up 2 ranks, it'll affect 5 targets. So if it only goes up to rank 5, and it's a little expensive to get to rank 5, but if you get it to rank 5, your challenge will affect 8 targets. Another one is the cry resist chance. This makes it more difficult for the monsters to resist your cry skills. A lot of the Guardian's threat generation skills are cries, and if you play with sound, you actually hear your character yell, scream at the monster. You can also mouse over the skill, and it'll pop up the tooltip, and it'll say resistance cry. So you know that it's a cry skill. So some examples of the Guardian cry skills are challenge is a cry, litany of defiance is a cry, fray the edge is a cry. There's some other ones too, but those are some examples. Guardian's threat block and parry legacy. If you will have to have the legendary trait Guardian's threat so that you can be in Guardian's threat stance. If that is not a trait that you use often, almost all the time or often, then it might not be worth it to use this legacy. But if you've got the Guardian's threat, this Guardian's threat block and parry will increase the amount of block and parry that you get while you are in that stance. And the more block, the better. You want your block as high as you can get it. I had a lot of trouble finding what the caps are for these things nowadays because a lot of things changed when Rohan came out, and the caps on a lot of things changed, and a lot of the information on the internet has not been updated. Suffice it to say, you want your block to be as high as you can get it. I think the cap is 25%, but I could be wrong. It could be 50% now, and I'm just not aware of it because I couldn't find it anywhere. Another legacy to consider is Guardian's Ward block chance. We talked about Guardian's Ward. You wanted to try to keep that one up all the time to increase your block chance. And this will make your block chance with Guardian's Ward even better. Guardian's Ward parry chance is the same skill that it will affect Guardian's Ward, but instead of the block, it will increase your chance to parry. And when the parry happens, then your Whirling Retaliation pops up, and that's nice to have to siphon the threat off of the rest of the party. The weapon, again, the weapon is not quite as critical as the belt, but it does have a couple nice legacies on it. You should have a one-handed weapon so that you can have a shield in the other hand. If you want to have a two-handed weapon, that should be your overpower weapon. Some people will have multiple weapons so that they can have an overpower weapon and a tanking weapon. I do not have an overpower weapon. I don't understand the DPS Guardian at all, but some people do, and that's fine. You just want to have your tanking weapon be a one-handed weapon so that you can have a shield as well. And on the weapon, you want to consider the Legacy Guardian's Pledge cooldown. We talked about the pledge. It gives you increased block, parry, and evade for 15 seconds. And the Guardian's Pledge cooldown will make that skill refresh more quickly. Guardian's Ward duration legacy. We've talked about Guardian's Ward. This will make Guardian's Ward last longer, so you don't have to hit that button quite as often to keep Guardian's Ward going. Warrior's Heart, also called Warrior's Fortitude. At level 64, it changes. Before level 64, it's Warrior's Heart. After level 64, it's Warrior's Fortitude. The Warrior's Fortitude duration legacy causes that skill to last longer, so you'll have that morale bonus for longer. One that I do consider pretty important for your weapon for the tanking Guardian is the area of effect AoE targets. So if you have that legacy on your weapon, it's going to increase the number of targets affected by all of your AoE skills. So your Whirling Retaliation will sap aggro off of, it will sap aggro from the party, and it will increase the aggro generated on more targets. Vexing Blow, if you're traded with the class trait Harasser, it will make that affect even more targets. It will make your challenge affect more targets. It will make your Litany of Defiance affect more targets. It will make your Sweeping Cut affect more targets, so you have more chances to crit and get that to increase your threat. So that's probably, and again, in my opinion, the most important one to have on your tanking weapon. And that's essentially the basics. There's definitely, you're going to play with things. You're going to find some stuff that works for you and some stuff that doesn't work for you. Just, read your skills, read them often. Like I said, every couple updates I try to go through and actually read all my skills again, because they keep us on our toes. They change things. Ask questions, and play with your traits. And ask your party members to work with you. Ask them to wait until you call for an assist before they start damage, so you can get the aggro. And as the Guardian, you're kind of supposed to be in charge of the combat. So if you need something in order to be in charge of the combat, say it.